Most dog owners make hot spots worse on accident. We want to teach you how to hopefully prevent, but also treat hot spots if you think that your dog has one. So the first thing we want to answer is, what is a hot spot? Dr. Levy, can you share with everybody exactly what a hot spot is and is not?
Well, hotspot is just a simple term for an open sore that has been created by the dog, so they have licked themselves to the point where there is an open sore. It's often crusty, sometimes oozing, maybe a little bit painful. Like basically they kind of lick it compulsively. It's kind of like if you feel like you have to pick at a scab. They just often cannot seem to leave it alone. Hot spots can come up pretty quickly, like overnight. If maybe a dog has eaten something that jostled their immune system, or something is bothering them. For example, it could be a nerve sensation in the skin that makes them want to lick a certain spot. But they'll basically lick until they create a wound. So that's what the classic hot spot is. Most common ones are also called lick granulomas. It's called a granuloma because the skin gets thicker just from the repeated abrasion of the dog licking at it. And those are the ones they commonly form on the wrists or sometimes even on the forearms. But really, it could be anywhere the dog can reach.
So where do hot spots come from? How do our dogs get these hot spots where they have these places on them that they just can't help but lick? Well, typically it's coming from a place of imbalance. It could be a level of inflammation or irritation as well. So, anything from imbalance in the gut microbiome all the way to, maybe they were around some toxic chemicals, had some toxic exposure that can bring about disruption or irritation to the microbiome on the skin. That is also there's also a microbiome for the skin. And so it's really hard to know exactly where it's coming from, but that is also why when we talk about prevention all the time, that's why this is a big deal, because you can actually do a lot to hopefully even prevent them from getting them in the first place by keeping their system more in balance, especially from the inside out.
And sometimes it's pretty clear what causes it. So there have been cases where somebody has maybe applied a topical flea, tick, insecticide kind of thing, and the dog loses the hair in that spot and it turns into kind of an open, oozing sore. Probably about 1 million years ago, the Purina rep at the practice that I was working at gave me a 40-pound bag of Purina dog chow so I could feed it to my dogs and see how miraculous it was. I was feeding my dogs dry food back then, and so I fed them, I opened the bag of Purina dog chow and fed them out of it, and by the next morning, one of my dogs had created a huge hot spot on his side where he had licked himself compulsively and had this big, open, oozing sore. So sometimes you can figure out what it is, sometimes you can't, and then you start looking around at, what season is it, what might the dog have been exposed to, but really it's not so much about that type of exposure. It's easy enough to say, well, gosh, I'll never feed my dog that food again. But then the question is, then what are you going to do about this evidence that has come up on the surface of the skin that's telling you, whoa, something happened in the microbiome?
Mm-hmm. So a hot spot is, as pretty much anything that we talk about it's a very superficial, external signal about something else that's going on deeper in their system. And so, the first thing that we're going to encourage people to do if you've got an existing hotspot on your dog is always going to be to work from the inside out. And as you're working from the inside out, there are certainly topical things you can do to help manage it and hopefully bring some relief to your dog. But really, that's very much a Band-Aid solution if you're not going to also address things from the inside out. So what would we tell you to do if your dog has a hot spot to make sure that you're doing that internal work before you just go for the topical?
So that's where you're going to hopefully introduce some raw food if you're not already feeding your dog raw. Do some type of gut reset. We have that pretty well explained in the raw feeding guidelines. You have to think about omega-3s in the diet. And I know that everybody rushes for the fish oil. Those supplements are easy to find. Really what we're talking about lately is getting omega-3s from food sources. And that's also in the guidelines. So, and that kind of thing, like those things are all easy to do. And what they'll do is restore the normal intestinal microbiome so that these things just basically happen less and less as your dog's system settles down. At the same time, you have to not provoke it.
So these are some good things that you can make sure that you are actively doing or putting into your dog or putting in place for your dog. There are a couple of things that we really would want to make sure are being avoided and that you're being aware of. First and foremost is going to be to eliminate any and all chemicals that are being put in and on your dog or around your dog. So this includes things like treated grass, really trying to avoid any of that chemical or toxic exposure is going to be huge to not aggravate this further. The other thing is to think about, how stressful is the environment? Stress is a huge immunosuppressant. And so if your dog's already struggling, and living in a very stressful situation in one way or another, you're going to want to try and minimize or eliminate as many of those stressors as possible. And then the last thing is going to be kind of those invisible threats. So things like your EMF producing items, your laptops, your phone, your microwave, make sure that you're not having your dog right next to the Wi-Fi router, that type of thing. Those are just, it's easy to not think about those things because you can't see them, but they actually do a tremendous amount to really hamper that immune response as well.
So then what do you do about the hot spot itself? There's a great tendency to want to put something on it. However, these types of sores typically need to be exposed to air in order to heal. So the best thing to do is something like a green tea rinse. So you just take regular green tea with caffeine, regular tea, because the tannic acids are pretty much what does the drying up of the hot spot for you. Tea is also antiseptic. And just has that type of astringent quality. So you brew green tea as if you're going to drink it. So boiling water, 1 tea bag per mug, boiling water, steep for 10 minutes because you want a really strong extraction of tea. And then I just pour the tea into a container, stick in the fridge, and let it cool down. Once it's cool, depending on where the sore is, if it's somewhere on the dog's body, you could soak a clean washcloth in your tea, lay it on wherever the sore is, and you want to press it onto the area and hold it on there for as long as the dog will let you. Like 2 to 5 minutes is ideal. If you can get even 2 minutes out of your dog, maybe find somebody to help you feed the dog treats to keep it occupied or whatever. If you're talking about a foot lesion, then I would typically just pour the tea into a Tupperware or a bowl and just stick the dog's foot in there. This is much less effective if you try to wipe or spray or something like that. You really want it to soak into the skin as much as possible. So when my dog had that big hot spot on his side, I literally just treated it with tea. Even though it was a really big spot, he was a really big dog, I think I treated it twice and then it dried up and healed from there. I didn't need to continue to treat it. Another option, if you don't have green tea, is to use apple cider vinegar, cut it half and half with water. And sometimes apple cider vinegar can be a little bit too drying. And so if the skin starts to feel a little bit rough or look a little bit flaky, then for one thing, your work might be done. If the dog is still trying to lick it, you could switch to a bentonite clay soak. So it's like a tablespoon of powdered bentonite clay or an ounce, like a shot glass worth of a liquid bentonite clay formula. You want to make sure it's food grade bentonite clay so that if your dog shakes and some of it comes off and they want to eat the clay, or if they go back to licking the spot again, or if your other dog licks the spot, you just want to make sure you're not poisoning anybody. You can mix enough bentonite clay with water to make a paste and just kind of put a good layer on there and then just leave it, let it dry. It will crumble and fall off when it's dried up and has done its job. Food grade bentonite clay, you can find it at health food stores. I've bought it on Amazon, and I just search for organic food grade bentonite clay, and that's how I found it. And then for different types of sores, if something is dry, crusting, and you're thinking, well, I don't really want to dry that up more because it's already dry and like it feels rough, maybe there's a dry scab or crust on there, you can use honey. So I'll use honey typically on dry things and sugar on wet things. And so you just smear a thick layer of honey on there. Depending on where the sore is, you might need to put a t-shirt on your dog so that they're not getting honey all over your home and belongings. And you can just leave it on there. It will kind of come off when it's done doing whatever it was going to do. But honey is also antiseptic. It's perfectly safe. You can use it for burns. I've done that a bunch of times on dogs. And then if something is really open and oozing and you've got, serum maybe coming down the dog's leg or something that is really dripping, there I would use sugar. Typically I would use powdered sugar or confectioner's sugar because the little sugar granules are smaller. So you get more effect of the surface area. The sugar will not only soak up the ooze, but sugar, like honey, is also antiseptic. So that means these things are antibacterial, antifungal, and you don't need to do anything to it. The key is to handle and touch the skin as little as possible. Do not rub or scrub. So if you're going to do a tea soak, you basically soak your cloth in tea, lay it on where the sore is, press it on there for 2 to 5 minutes, take that cloth off, take a dry, clean cloth, and just blot. Don't rub it. As soon as the skin starts trying to heal, and it often looks scary, a granulation bed looks like very active, kind of lumpy, bumpy, bright red skin as it's starting to heal. Or if a scab forms, don't disturb that. Like that's protecting the new skin that's coming along. So just leave it on there and don't pick at it, don't rub it, don't clean it every day or go after it too heavy-handedly. And I do not recommend using iodine or povidone iodine, which I know when we were kids, it used to get squirted onto every sore and every open wound, but it is kind of caustic and it's no longer recommended.
So if you do have a dry or a hot spot that's on the drier side, you really want to be very careful about how much you're messing with that as well. If you feel like it needs to be cleaned for whatever reason, you're going to do a very, very gentle cleaning with the green tea that we talked about before. It's again, you're going to be, lightly patting it, sitting it on there, lightly patting it dry. And then if, after that you want to put something topical on it because it is very dry and irritated, the couple of options would be something like coconut oil. And again, your dog is going to want to lick it off. So you might need to cover it with something so that they don't go back and continue to lick. There's also a really good salve that we'll link down below made by CBD Dog Health. That is just some really good ingredients that really can help heal and soothe that area. It's a very calming, soothing salve. And so we'll just link that down below as an option of something that you could, buy that's commercially made for dogs. That's a really good product. So hopefully this kind of lays out, the idea that, you have a hot spot and so you need to keep it really clean and you need to keep putting stuff on it and that kind of thing. It's actually probably going to worsen the situation, which is kind of what we meant at the beginning of this video when we said oftentimes pet parents don't realize what they're doing is actually making this worse. The less you can disturb it and touch it, the better off you are. And so hopefully these are some tips and tricks of things that you can do. Very easy to access some of these things, very inexpensive treatment options that really can make a big difference for hot spots. And again, don't forget, really make sure that you're doing the work from the inside out as well, because we want to keep these from happening again. So gentle treatment with minimal contact, and just make sure that whatever treatment you're using that we mentioned is appropriate for the type of hotspot that your dog has.